May I speak in the name of our loving, liberating, and life-giving God. Amen. You may be seated. I recently came across a cartoon that has nothing to do with Easter, and yet I think has a lot to do with what we are celebrating together this morning. Imagine a giant chalkboard, like at the front of an enormous collegiate lecture hall, and all across it are what appears to be the markings of a very complicated mathematical proof. The marks seem to cluster in 3 sections. There are a few numbers, but mostly there are mathematical symbols, there are punctuation marks, there are Greek letters. It's pretty tricky to figure out what is going on, other than that this is an incredibly complex proof or a very detailed explanation of some profoundly complicated process. In front of the chalkboard stand 2 people wearing the thick glasses and long white coats that tell us they are scientists. One is younger and one is older. And the younger one looks on with something like excitement, something like fear, awaiting the verdict of the elder mentor. The older gentleman is pointing a finger at the central section. We have the setup for the problem, we have the resolution of the problem, and in the middle, the only part of the entire thing that is legible to us lay people, it says, and then a miracle occurs. And the older gentleman is pointing to it and saying, I think you need to be a little more explicit in step 2 here. Easter morning is so much like this. We know the problem. Jesus is dead. He was crucified on Good Friday. Nails have been driven into his hands and his feet. He has breathed his last agonizing breath on the cross, a persecuted criminal, a victim of state-sanctioned violence. His legs have been broken. His limp body has been taken down and laid in a rough-hewn stone tomb. In Matthew's gospel alone, we are assured that this tomb is not only secure by a boulder, it is also sealed, and guards are set outside of it to ensure that no one goes and removes the body and pretends that he has been risen, as the promised Messiah would be. And we have the fact of this morning that he is alive, that he greets the women on the road. We have the fact of the rest of the New Testament that says he lives. But not a single one of the gospel authors even tries to tell us what happened in that tomb. Nobody tries to even give us a glimpse into the darkness of the miracle that we say is at the heart of this day. That somehow this body, beloved by so many, bearing the hope of a whole people, died. That the flesh grew cold and pale for days in the cold stone tomb. That the heart, which had been beating with the hope of Israel, stopped. That these lungs that had been full of breath ceased to rise and to fall. And that somehow that flesh grew pink and warmed. Somehow that heart and those lungs that had grown still began to move, and he returned to life. The fact that the Gospels are so silent about this miracle makes me wonder if it is not the wholeness of the miracle that we actually celebrate today. Certainly, if the fact of a body coming back to life alone was the good news, that's already happened. Jesus raised Lazarus, he raised a child. Also, if that's the wholeness of the miracle, the angel and Jesus himself saying, "Do not be afraid," makes no sense because everything about this story so far is utterly terrifying. There is an earthquake. There are angels descending like lightning. There is a dead body coming back to life. And yet that is the refrain of the morning. Do not be afraid. Though you don't understand what is happening, do not be afraid. Though you have no power in this moment, do not be afraid, because God is at work. I can't help but wonder if the wholeness of the miracle this morning is actually what comes after his body is raised. The good news that the angels tell those brave and wonderful women who went to the tomb, that Jesus is not here, he has been raised, and he is going ahead of you into God's future. That, I think, is the hope of Easter, that God has a future for us that can be disrupted, can be momentarily detoured by death, but cannot be ended by it. God has a future for us and for all people and for our world and for all of creation that is bigger than anything we have ever dared to dream. That first Easter morning was not picture perfect, Sunday best. It was birth and beginnings and becomings. It was wobbly. It was uncomfortable. It was full of uncertainty. Perhaps today is like that for you. Perhaps your life feels wobbly or unsettled or uncertain. Just an hour before we started this liturgy, we thought we were going to baptize a beautiful baby who is a member of this community, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that today. Though Eloise is fine, she's healthy, we're going to have to postpone that. So even our service is uncertain. Even our service has the becoming and birthing qualities of that first Easter day. Jesus is raised, we say this morning, but he is changed by his encounter with death. He is raised bearing wounds in his own flesh, wounds that remain open for some time, wounds that he shows to his friends, wounds that Thomas will actually touch. I wonder if part of the miracle that we get to inhabit alongside him in this season of Easter is that we, like him, are raised into newness of life that does not undo or remove the wounds that we have also endured. We, like him, are changed by our encounters with depression and despair and darkness and death. That is true. It is also true that they do not have the last word, that there is hope that is bigger than anything we have ever let ourselves imagine. When Jesus is raised, he also gives a new future to his friends who had thought that the period had been put on this sentence, and instead more dots are added, and what looked like an ending becomes the greatest plot twist in all of history. And that community is raised also bearing wounds, also carrying heartache, but they go together into God's promised future. I think if we say that because Jesus is raised, death is no longer what we thought death once was, we also have to say that life together is no longer what life once was. We also have to say that the goodness and the unseen grace that moved that morning continues to move in our lives, continues to move in our communities, our society, and our world. because God is going ahead of us into a promised future of joy and healing and wholeness and connection. I think sometimes the bigness of the resurrection miracle is almost a stumbling block. How do we conceive of it? We have no words for it. There's no attempt to even explain it in the Bible. But what if it points to the miracles of our everyday lives? What if it invites us to notice today, during coffee hour, during the egg hunt, during dinner with your family, at work tomorrow, wherever you go, the unseen grace that is still working in your life and in our life together to bring about a healing and a wholeness that defies what the world tells us is possible. A few weeks ago, carrying the heaviness of the world, carrying the heartache of many people I love, carrying my own grief and sadness, my 9-year-old son came to me with a little cut on his leg. Like every good mother, I applied the strong medicine of "aw" and cleaned the wound and put a Band-Aid on it, promised him he would be okay. But I thought in that moment about how utterly powerless I am to heal him. I can make the conditions for healing a little better. I can not get in the way of healing. I can reassure him as he's moving through that uncertain, painful, uncomfortable process that while I can't fix this cut, his body knows what it's doing and it will get better. And so, inspired by that, I wrote a poem which I will offer as our closing. Tell me it's not a miracle, how skin once rent returns, how soft flesh holds memory enough for repair. We clumsily bring seam to jagged seam as unseen tendrils unfurl across the slippery breach, certain as the sunflower stretching toward the inviting eye of the sun. Connections once severed don't reform, but form anew. Unimagined possibilities sprouting in the silent dark. Nerves extend toward quiet receivers, drawn by the dizzying dream of touch. Tell me it's not a miracle, how the pearly ridge, smooth as the abalone shell, remembers us, the body reconciled to itself. Tell me it's not a miracle, how we heal. Amen.